Hello, everybody, and welcome to Successful Work Transitions webinar and Q&A. Hopefully you can see and hear me. Thank you to those that are lovely and prompt. I usually find that it takes a couple of minutes for people to realise they need to register with StreamYard to get in. So I usually give them just a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, as people are joining, those of you that are here, I'd love to hear, please, what work transitions are on your mind right now? What sort of thing are you going through? What questions might you have? It just helps me to tailor this to you a little bit more and make sure that you get as much value out of it as possible, really. You can message me on the chat, or there is an option to do a private message if you'd prefer for it just to come through to me. I'd love to hear what work transitions are on your mind right now, please. Hello and welcome to those coming through. Welcome to Successful Work Transitions webinar and Q&A. Please do use the chat. Drop in what work transitions are on your mind right now. Or use, you can do private messaging as well if you'd prefer for it just to come through to me. We've got a couple coming through. Somebody is switching career from data science, now looking for another job into data science roles. So they've gone from testing to data science. Switching career is a massive work transition. Absolutely. The things we're going to talk about today will tap into that. And I've been through it myself. So I know it's a very exciting time, but it's also a bit, someone else is looking to make that kind of move, but more of a functional move than an industry move. In IT, would like to move to HR, coaching or change management. Moving from a research science role into environmental sustainability position, so another industry change. From corporate to non-exec board advisory positions, so that's almost like a kind of a sort of role change and a bit of industry change there. Do I have any advice? I'm hoping that you will get a lot out of this webinar. It's designed to be applicable for all work transitions, be that returning from maternity leave, changing industries, changing functions, being promoted. And then there'll be a Q&A at the end where we can go through much more specific. So as we go through, I'll have your changes and your transitions in mind here. But then also I'll circle back to these at the end and see if you've got any further questions and maybe add a few additional thoughts with the context of the material that I've shared. So today is going to be all about why successful work transitions are really important, what the key elements are for successful work transitions, and I'm going to sprinkle in a couple of anonymized real client stories to bring it to life a little bit, and also so if you have similar feelings or situations, you know you're not alone. There will, of course, be a plug for my services, and for sticking through that, you get an extra little bonus. And then at the end, as I said, there'll be a Q&A. But please do put your questions, thoughts in the comments as we go through. I will try and dip in and out of them, but if not, I will definitely come back to them at the end. So just before we get stuck in, what is a work transition? What do we mean by that? A lot of you have touched on it already. Could mean a change of career, industry, could be a change of function. It could be returning from leave. It could be a promotion, could be making a big career decision, a new contract. Spoke to somebody this week who's just moved country. Change in working hours, could be going to part-time or to full-time. Somebody said they're getting into more challenging work, so taking on more responsibility. Could be going through redundancy or a restructure, or even new management can really bring massive changes, and that counts as a work transition as well. So all of these sorts of things are totally applicable to today's webinar. So I work with a lot of people going through this kind of thing. And a lot of people really underestimate the difficulties of change, even positive change. So something like a promotion or something you've driven yourself, like an industry change or a functional change, it's really exciting. It's really positive. You know why you want to do it, but it's still change. And it's a lot of change. And it's really tough. we often feel like we have to manage everything alone as well when we're going through change, especially if we're doing something like we're going from into a functional role into a non-exec role, for instance, where there's this need to make sure that you're putting on that kind of polish, even if you're finding underneath you've got that swan-like legs and you're feeling a bit. Often people feel rushed and overwhelmed by the lack of time to reflect, plan, and adjust. Rarely do we have control over the time of change. Even if we've made it happen, change happens so fast, and it's rarely in isolation. If we're thinking about work change and work transitions, it often has a knock-on impact into our home lives. It could have a big impact on commute times, the routine of our families, where we might even live, our routines, all sorts of things. So there can be a huge amount of change all in one go. And that can lead to confidence wobbles, totally normal. And often people get advice from friends and colleagues, which I will come on to much later, which is great, but that often means that they come to me saying they feel frustrated by the lack of new perspectives, actionable ideas, and objectivity. So these are just some of the reasons why people struggle with work transitions. So very briefly, who am I? If you've not met me before, hello, I'm Anne Harrod-Ross, and I have first-hand experience of work transitions. I worked for over 16 years in leadership positions in global corporates like Johnson & Johnson, Reckitt's, Premier Foods. And I worked out in those 16, 17 years, I had over 15 work transitions. Some of them were bigger, like when I took on responsibility for 5 countries I'd never even been to before, and some were smaller, like a change in management or dealing with a restructure and a shift in responsibilities. When I left corporate, I really wanted to go and make a difference because I found, particularly as I got more senior in my career, work transitions got harder. And they got harder because the expectations were greater and there were just fewer people I could really talk to about it. And organizations think, oh, we don't have a problem with work transitions here. Nobody said anything. Like, well, yeah, of course they haven't, because no one wants to put their hand up and say, by the way, I'm finding this really tough. And in my experience, when I did do that, I got shot down pretty quickly. So it's harder than it should be, was my experience. So now I'm a qualified and accredited coach. And I'm not your stereotypical coach. I don't have an HR background. I actually come from a commercial background. And I'm quite direct and quite challenging. For anybody who's into personality profiling, which I find fascinating, I am a Myers-Briggs ENTJ. On the colour profiling, insights profiling, I am blue, red, green, yellow. And what other ones are there? DISC profiling, I am a DC. All of that just means that I'm structured, analytical, and I'm quite challenging. So I always bring people back to their topic. We get real about stuff, and I'm quite direct and challenging. And that's, I suppose, what makes me a little bit different to the average. There are lots of different people, of course, in this kind of world. So, oops, pressing the wrong thing. So why is it important to focus on successful work transitions? Well, one of the big things is work transitions are a great opportunity to steer your own ship. It's a fabulous opportunity for growth when you're able to grab it with both hands. And that growth doesn't have to just be professional growth. It can also be personal growth. Because as I said, these changes don't happen in isolation. They can affect long-term progress and success, both positively or negatively, depending on how it goes. But there is a super narrow window for getting the benefits out of these because they happen so fast. And that timeline is rarely in our control. So acting quickly gives a much better shot at future success and staying ahead in your career. If you miss the boat, it can really stall things. And it means that you, instead of being an opportunity for growth, sometimes it can lead to the whole engine stalling. This is a picture of me and my husband canoeing, kayaking. And if anybody's done that, you'll know that the person at the front is responsible for the kind of speed and the momentum. And the person at the back is responsible for the direction. I mean, we find we both want to do a bit of both and turns into chaos. But when you're managing your career, and especially work transitions, you have to be doing both, and quickly. You need that momentum, that direction, and you need the power all at the same time. Another reason that successful work transitions are really important is stress and emotional well-being. The brain hates change. We're actually wired to lead to anxiety and frustration when we're making big decisions or going through change. And that's because there's a part of the brain called the amygdala that is responsible for our kind of fight or flight approach to things. So if you hear a rustle in the bush, our brain is programmed to go, let's prepare for that being a lion. And the brain is wired to do that, not just for physical situations like, is that a lion in the bush? But it's also wired for a social situation like that, because back in the day, in cave people times, being part of your tribe was very important for survival. So when you feel like a social thing, and work obviously comes under that if we're grouping it like this, your amygdala also goes into overdrive in terms of threat, like social threat. So that's what the brain is doing with anxiety and frustration when there's change. It likes patterns, it likes predictability. And when it doesn't have that, that's when we get that extra anxiety and frustration. And these feelings, if we don't get a handle on them, can escalate, and that affects both personal well-being and absolutely professional performance. That's why we have to take immediate action. And as I said, windows very small with work transitions. But taking immediate action lifts those negative emotions. It makes things smoother, and it makes it more enjoyable. Even if a change has happened to us or initially feels really negative, we can turn it around and make it more productive and enjoyable. But if we delay action, we might miss the boat, but it could also result in prolonged stress, decreased job satisfaction. And a phrase a lot of my clients use when they first come to me is this major loss of mojo. And we don't want that. The third major reason that successful work transitions are really important is maintaining confidence. As careers progress, that expectation increases. Often we end up feeling like an imposter and losing our confidence if we don't deal with that. So we have to deal with it to stop us holding ourselves back. We have to deal with it quickly. I had a manager once. I just stepped into a bigger new role, taken on quite a lot more responsibility, much bigger team. And it was great, and I knew I could do it, but I was feeling a lot of wobbles, and it was a lot. And there was a lot I had to fix when I got into that role. And I said to my manager, this is a lot, isn't it? And I'm feeling quite overwhelmed. I was just sharing. And they just said to me, look, if you can't handle it, there's 10 people behind you that want this role, so crack on. And I knew at that moment, we weren't going to be talking about feelings anymore. But it was a useful bit of information for me. That person was amazing functionally. I learned tons from them. But we never spoke about things like confidence and feelings again, because clearly not a strength for them. So I know what it feels like to have that kind of attitude, and that can happen a lot in the workplace. A lot of people, it's not their strength to help people through these kinds of things. If we delay action on maintaining our confidence and staying positive, we can lose credibility, because people notice when you've got that confidence and that poise. And if you don't have that, people don't always know if they can trust you. They don't know you yet. Particularly if you're in a new situation, you can end up feeling really frustrated when you're not confident, and that worry of being overlooked for opportunities like promotions because you're not putting your best foot forward. This is an example here I wanted to share that when I changed careers, I wanted to do something a little bit different. And my friend had applied me with wine. She owns a gym. She was like, you'd be a great holiday cover gym instructor. And you can learn in a weekend. Yeah, you can't. It takes months and exams and coursework. But I did it. And I loved it. And it really helped my own training. I've always been into this kind of thing. But when I turned up day one with this bunch of people, they were all so strong. A lot of them were already doing work in this area. And I just felt like I just rocked up. 17 years in commercial, sat behind a desk, and here's me now learning to be a gym instructor. But they were so welcoming, and they really boosted my confidence. They helped me realize I'd done exactly the same assessments they had. I was good at this. I knew what I was doing, and that I deserved to be there. And if I hadn't had myself open to that, I think I could have felt really intimidated, and I'd have lost out on something that is a really valuable part of my life. There's a huge amount about mindset there. So doing all this stuff successfully is why you're here today. Already step one, recognize that this is really important. So good for you. I wanted to touch on every change follows a curve. This is the Kubler-Ross change curve, no relation. And it was actually originally developed in terms of response to grief, because grief is one of the biggest transition a human could go through. But over time, people have noticed that these stages apply to all sorts of change, all change. But how long and how deep and extreme this curve is partly down to the situation, but then also partly down to how you get a hold of it and how you tackle the change. So how quickly you get to that integration stage, getting past the shock or surprise, the denial, the frustration, the low bit, and getting out the other end is down to you. So there are 4 key elements for successful work transitions: clarity, reflection, preparation, and support. I'm thinking about tweaking this diagram a bit because actually I think clarity, reflection, preparation are almost sequential, and support has to sit under that. I'm going to go through each of these one by one now. So let's start with clarity. There are 3 important clarity factors for successful work transitions, and they are mindset, resilience, and proactivity. Let's start with mindset. Many people lack the confidence and self-belief to have successful work transitions. They often have imposter feelings, limiting beliefs about themselves or the situation. And because our amygdala and our brain is in overdrive, we're much more susceptible to being influenced by others as well. And that's sometimes helpful, sometimes not helpful. But getting into the right mindset helps us spot opportunities, handle those challenges better, be proactive, keep our confidence high, reduce insecurity and self-doubt, and boost our motivation. So mindset is almost the first place I recommend starting when you're considering any work transition. So for the right work transition mindset, I work with people on understanding where you are now. What is your current mindset? What are your current emotional responses, and what are triggering those? What barriers are stopping you getting the mindset that you need? Develop helpful thoughts for a growth mindset instead of ones that are actually hindering you. A more helpful story. Focus on positivity, not to the point of that being toxic, of course, but focusing on our strengths as an example. There's loads of research to show focusing on our strengths and being positive about ourselves has a huge impact. And then I help people to explore ways to take control of their own mindset and move forwards. Somebody's added a really nice comment here. A feeling is a message and only lasts 90 seconds unless you choose to hold on to it. Easy to say, harder to live by. And absolutely, that is very, very true. Mindset is about the choices that we make, about the thoughts and feelings that come in. And yeah, it's not easy. I wouldn't have a job if it was easy. Resilience. I've talked about change being tough. It's tough because it uses a lot of energy, and it actually physically uses a lot of energy. The brain is having to work so much harder to sort of override a lot of the stress and anxiety that comes from change, which is why when we do training courses and things, we're applied with sweets and sugar and things, because when we're learning from new situations, the brain is burning a lot of energy. It needs carbs. There's a lot of fear from uncertainty. It's normal, it's okay, but it does make it difficult, even when a change is positive. And it can be demotivating and frustrating. A lot of people coming to me saying, I just want to get to that end point faster. I'm so frustrated. And again, that's totally normal. I see loads of people's resilience run down. And that's often from toxic situations that they're in or have come from, really difficult bosses or peers, the change that they're going through and just the pressure of having to make big decisions, it wears people down. But resilience is so important because it strengthens your ability to handle those emotional challenges. It strengthens your ability to choose the thoughts and feelings, helps maintain that positive outlook, even when you get unexpected difficulties, and it keeps your stress low. So to build that resilience, I work with clients on identifying and reframing the unhelpful things they tell themselves. Really challenging, especially if you've been given an unhelpful message over a long period of time. Pinpointing what is helping and hindering resilience right now, and exploring coping strategies that work for them to relight the fire. Everybody's different. Like you hear this stuff about, oh, self-care, go, have a bath. That does not work for me. Going for a run works for me. So it's like different things work for different people to get where they need to get to have the strength and the energy they need to work through change effectively. The third part in clarity is proactivity. So proactivity is a major differentiator between successful and unsuccessful work transitions. And I saw this myself when I was a hiring manager and a people leader. Taking charge of your own situation not only gives you more control, but it helps you clarify what you need and you want, and therefore helps you communicate that to actually get it. And it gives you a competitive advantage over your peers. I always used to say, if somebody's proactive, I can teach the rest. And if people don't know what they need and want and don't go after it, how am I supposed to know? How am I supposed to help them? So being proactive and getting to a place where you can be proactive is very, very powerful when going through change. Having the strength to be proactive does rely on that mindset and resilience work having already been done, of course. Once you have that mindset and the resilience stuff, you can then define your own values and goals. That's so important because that acts as like a North Star as you go through change to help you shape it in the way you need to for it to be right for you. Then you've got to figure out how to get the info and connections you need to achieve those values and goals. And then separate out what can you control and what can you not control. Then how do you control the controllables and come to a place of being okay with dropping the stuff you can't control? I had a coaching client this morning. She was trying to make a big decision, and we were talking about a strategy, and then she was like, yeah, but what if this person does this first? Yeah, but you can't control that. We can try and plan for it, but you cannot control the responses of others. You can try and influence them. You can try and plan for it. So you've got to let that worry go. So I'd like to share with you Sarah's story of a mindset shift. So Sarah was a senior leader in the data industry, and she just landed a new job after leaving a really toxic work environment that really wasn't helping her confidence or her mental health. The stress from her previous job left her feeling really lacking in confidence, doubting her skills and ability. Plus, her new job, although really exciting, meant more days in the office and a longer commute, which meant quite a big impact on her home life. She'd started preparing for her role already by reading books and articles. She was really trying to talk herself into being positive about it, but she just couldn't get there. All this unhelpful stuff that she'd been fed that wasn't true, wasn't helpful, had become part of her story, and she needed to undo that. So I helped her get in the right mindset and get more confident by identifying these stories. What was true, what wasn't true, finding the roots of that self-doubt, and reminding herself what she's capable of, focusing on her strengths. And I created a quiet, dedicated space for her to explore and reflect. She had a busy home life. She was trying to wrap stuff up in her old job. She was super diligent. And slowly, she began to trust her abilities again. She came up with effective ways to balance the demands of her new routine and her home life. And she started to really exceed expectations really quickly. She got some brilliant quick wins and quickly became a trusted leader in her new company. It was like seeing a different person, and it was a privilege to be part of that journey. But I've been there myself. I know what that feels like. And sometimes you just need that extra helping hand, don't you, to get the mindset, proactivity, and resilience back. So that was Sarah's story. So we've talked about clarity, step 1. Step 2 is reflection. So once we've got this kind of the strength, the resilience, the idea of what we need from this, how we're going to go and get it, we then need to reflect. And there are 2 essential reflection conditions for successful work transitions. The first is time to think, and the second is digging deep. Now, if I had £1 for every time somebody came to me and said, I am just too busy and too stressed to think, I'd be a bazillionaire. It is probably one of the biggest things I hear at the beginning of any coaching engagement, and that's because we all have very busy lives. We are reacting to things, especially when change and new things are chucked our way. And I've been there and I get it. But if we don't make the time to think, we end up rushing decisions. We have much higher stress levels, and we end up acting in a way that's not actually aligned with our goals. And we turn around and we're like, oh, this is not where I wanted to be. This is not what I wanted to be doing. That's why sessions with me are thinking appointments. I make sure that people have got time in the diary to think. I used to put an afternoon in, I think it was a couple of hours every Friday afternoon. I was like, development and thinking time. I even had prompts in my diary to reflect on about how my week had gone. What could I do better? What do I want to do next week? And I'm sure you can guess the number of times that actually happened. My diary was always hijacked, or it was always something more urgent that I needed to do. So making time to think. It's almost like I used to have a personal trainer in the gym. I still do, actually. And it's the only time I do go to classes, but it's the only time I really push myself, because you have that person who's expecting you to turn up, and they're there watching you going, come on, harder, harder. And it's just like that. It's that accountability. It's the time and space to think. It's times that are convenient and booked in advance. And it's the right environment for that particular individual to do their best thinking. Everybody thinks differently. And that's part of the skill of being a coach. It's also a safe space for emotions where there's no judgment. I had tears this morning from somebody, and it's totally okay. Feelings are important, and they're messages. And time to think space is 100% focused on the individual and has somebody always in their corner there. And that, I think, is the difference between doing it alone or not even doing it at all and doing it with somebody objective. Somebody said there's not even time to think about what jobs to apply for sometimes, or traveling a workload for the current work is too high to make time. Absolutely. If you're looking to change something, the time to think about it or do the research or go and do something about it has to be found on top of what is already, I'm sure, a very demanding job and work. Those that are looking for work full time will say it's a full-time job. It's tough. The second reflection condition is digging deep. Recognizing the roots of our thoughts and feelings is absolutely essential for properly overcoming obstacles. Addressing those underlying issues and developing strategies to move forward authentically. So in a way that is right for you. Not what I think, not what someone else thinks, not what some self-help book says, but strategies that actually are practical and work for you where you are right now. Without digging deep, people get stuck in these repetitive thinking patterns. It makes them feel really frustrated because they've only stuck a plaster on it, and they're unable to make that meaningful progress that actually helps their development rather than hindering it. So together with my clients, I uncover those underlying beliefs, experiences, and triggers. And it's not therapy. We're not like going back deep into our childhoods or stuff. It's like, where is that thought coming from? How helpful is it? What does it actually mean for you? What's it telling you? What experiences have led to that? Let's work through it. What triggers that? Helps you get new insight into yourself to actually move forward. And that's, I think, the difference between something like therapy and coaching is therapy is kind of looking backwards. Coaching is looking there to move forwards. So what are those strategies to grow from here to where you want to get to? Is getting from A to B. In order to do the digging deep, my job is to listen really deeply. And I always thought I was a good listener. People used to tell me I was a good listener, and as a manager, I used to really listen, and I'd been on every coaching course my organisation offered. But when I trained to be a professional coach, man, listening is such a massive area, and it's hard to do it really, really well and objectively. It's part of the challenge I enjoy about it. But that's the kind of listening you just don't get elsewhere. And that leads to challenging questions, and it leads to holding up the mirror and insights and things that you hadn't seen before. Come on, laptop. So I wanted to share with you David's story, about how he has some aha reflection moments. So he just started a new role at a much bigger company. It was a global role, initially confident, and he soon found himself coming up against unexpected challenges. He was struggling to connect with his manager. That's super common. He felt overwhelmed by the high expectations and sheer volume of opportunities to shape the role. Anyone ever had an opportunity to shape something? It's cool, it's exciting, but that often means they don't really know what they want from you, and they don't really know what the expectations are. And expectations are such a massive thing that can go wrong in work transitions. Emotionally, he felt super isolated, really frustrated, and it just led to this cycle of ever-growing self-doubt. He tried to handle it on his own and just thought that if I just keep working harder and longer hours, it'll be fine. I'll work my way through this. But all that did was trigger an old development challenge, which was perfectionism for him. He was like just trying to grab control of everything and make everything perfect, and he thought that would fix it, and it just didn't. And by the time he came to me, he was in a bit of a state. So we've stripped it right back to what was and what wasn't working. We worked on viewing his manager differently. You can't change someone, and if you've got to work with them, you've got to try some new things, and you've got to look at it differently. Understand where this perfection trigger was actually coming from, which is actually really interesting for him. It actually stemmed to a long-standing kind of competitive relationship with a sibling, and that need to always be the better one, and that they just didn't need to hold on to that anymore. So then we also experimented with new approaches. Some of them didn't work. That's okay. That's why we experiment. That's a big part of trying to work your way through something, isn't it? But we tried new approaches. And I provided that safe space for David to share his feelings, explore his challenges, and think differently. Because he had nobody else really to talk to where he could just say it all with no judgment. And he learned to better understand and communicate with his manager, and that went a long way to just making it a lot easier in the short term. He worked on controlling those perfectionism urges, knowing when it was helping him and when it wasn't. And he managed those imposter feelings over time. He did deserve to be there. He was doing a good job. And when he focused on what really mattered and what was important, then that started to make a real difference. So he did end up improving his relationship with his manager, much more functional, less clashing. He set better boundaries, and then he felt more secure, connected, supported and capable, with more time for activities outside of work. And that then also boosted his resilience, which enabled proactivity and being able to move forwards for him. So that was David's story of some aha moments that he had from reflection. So we've talked about clarity and we've talked about reflection. Next is preparation. Preparation is something I see lacking hugely in work transitions. It's crazy. If you think about when you've joined a new company, hand on heart, how much prep did you do before day one? It is a massive career transition, and all the research shows that people who start preparing for a new role ahead of actually starting it have a huge advantage versus those that are really focused on their old role, aren't thinking about their new one, go on holiday for a week and then turn up on day one and expect that the company will give them everything they need to hit the ground running. That is very rarely the case. So most people don't prepare and plan thoroughly. But feeling prepared and having a plan gives confidence that others will notice and feel, so it super boosts credibility. Without it, you can lose time. You're not giving that air of credibility and confidence, and you can make poorer decisions. You know what it's like when you go through any change or trying to create change or having change happening to you. There's all this stuff flying at you, new information, new people, new things to think about. You've got to prepare. Now, I accept that not everybody loves to prepare. I'm a natural planner, obviously, given my personality preferences. I blooming love it. But not everybody does. And different people have different ways that they need to prepare that works for them. So I help my clients figure out what you need to prepare for. You don't have to prepare everything. What are the absolute priorities? Some people love to do loads of prep, just don't necessarily know what prep to do. Some people hate it and it gives them the fear. So what do they need to prepare for? How best to go about it for them? And what is just that natural next step for getting it done? Sometimes it's really small things that are actually stopping people moving ahead when preparing. Now you might think, yeah, but this is such an unpredictable situation. It's just definitely not going to go to plan. That's okay. It's normal. But without a plan, you've got no direction. And with no direction, you could go anywhere. But we don't just want to go anywhere. We want to make this work for us. So I want to share Claire's story. Claire. She was a senior manager in a marketing firm and discovered that a restructure meant her role had changed. It was becoming way less enjoyable and lacked the development opportunities that she needed. She said they kind of sucked the fun bits out of the role. And she dreaded planning. It was not her thing. It made her feel stuck, uncertain, frustrated. And she wasn't making the time to plan for this next career move and define her development plan in this new situation. She'd spoken to a mentor, which is great, but they told her what she already knew, which was she needed to work out what she wanted and make a plan to get it. Sounds simple, right? But she was still struggling to know how to do that, especially because she was clouded with all these emotions around the restructure and feeling like all the good stuff had gone to somebody else. So she kept getting stuck in this same loop of thinking. So to make a well-informed career decision, was she going to stay? Was she going to go? And if she stayed, what was it going to look like? How does she make it work for her? We explored right back to the beginning. What were her values, her goals, and what were her options? And by clarifying her true wants and needs, it led to much more authentic decision-making, challenged some hidden assumptions about her new situation and herself, and it boosted her confidence in her decision because she'd done such a thorough job of going back to basics and building up from there. She actually decided to stay, and she broke down the planning in manageable steps, examined her dislike for planning, which was also really interesting in itself, and then she found ways to overcome it and experimented with her approach. And that meant she made a confident career decision, created a development plan to communicate her needs to the company. She actually got pretty much everything on her wish list, which shows if you don't ask, you don't get. She then rediscovered her career mojo, and she just felt calmer, clearer, happier, and more confident in her decisions from taking that time to do the work. So we've talked about clarity, reflection, and preparation. Now we're going to talk about the support that underpins all of that. Many people lack the appropriate support necessary to handle change. Far too many people try and go it alone and get to a bit of a state before they seek help. But having the right support removes isolation, provides reassurance, and helps maintain that emotional balance we've talked about being so important for getting through change. I always talk about two types of support: internal support and external support. So what do I mean by those? Well, internal support is within your organisation and your world, your friends, your family, your colleagues. Friends and family are so important when we're going through any kind of change. It's that unconditional support, but they will look at transitions much more from a personal happiness perspective. So you just need to be aware of that lens when you're talking to any friends and family. Co-workers, managers, mentors, super important. They understand your workplace well, or your career well, your industry well, useful for getting feedback and for hearing their different experiences and perspectives. But remember, they are their experiences and perspectives, not necessarily in the service of you. That's why internal support is rarely enough. And that's why you also need external support, such as coaching with me, obviously, plug. Objectivity and confidentiality are thinking game changers. because it helps you really strip it back to what's important, and you can say whatever you think without judgment, without it going anywhere. And that means you can actually get to the bottom of stuff and move forwards. That's why working one-to-one with an experienced, importantly qualified and accredited coach helps you challenge your own thinking, find those new perspectives, and keep on track to get you to where you want to go. So how do you get the support that you need? From an internal perspective, do share how you're feeling with selected friends and family. We all have a negative drainer in our family. I'm sure everyone can think of one. You don't talk to them. Be mindful who you spend your time with in your friendship group and your family, because our brain is in that overdrive. We're much more susceptible to that, and it's not always helpful. So be selective with who you speak to about these things. Consider what, if any, support might be available in your organization, and then be deliberate with it. Set tangible objectives for each person interaction that you have, but be mindful of where they're coming from. They may have other things going on, like political things, that might not actually be very helpful for you, but that's fine so long as you're aware of it. And for the external support, get a coach who's experienced in change and transitions. Check they're qualified, check they're accredited with a major professional body like the ICF, EMCC, like me, or AC. There are a lot of cowboys out there. And book a complimentary discovery call. Majority of coaches offer a free discovery call like I do, and work with somebody who you think you can open up to and who you think will understand you. There's a stat that says that 40% of any therapeutic outcome is down to the relationship built between the therapist or person and a coach. So it's super important to build a good relationship. So stepping back, my 3 top tips for successful work transitions: be proactive, be mindful of who you talk to, and get support sooner rather than later. Navigating any kind of change is not easy. It takes energy, proactivity, and loads of support to get it right. And that's why coaching with me is a solution that includes the 4 things that are most missing from people going through work transitions. That's confidentiality and objectivity of talking and thinking, the appropriate level of challenge, dedicated time and space to think, and digging deep below the surface to actually resolve things and move forwards. And I do a structure of, at the beginning, a little bit more intense weekly, they're moving to every other week, confidential 1-hour online coaching sessions that work for people. The accountability of having those sessions booked in advance at a time that suits you. If people are not so experienced in coaching, I also give information on how to prepare for sessions so that people can get the most out of them. And I believe in 100% autonomy. I don't take many notes. I'm focused on listening to you and asking great questions. And I don't set homework. If you want to set yourself some, and that's part of the conversation, you go for it. You will need to be doing actions, otherwise what's the point? But I do have some neurodivergent clients, for instance, who do like me to just provide a few bullet points afterwards, or do need a little bit more support in that area, which is totally fine. But I believe you have to take control and be proactive of your own development actions and making the most of your thinking time. So how does it work? You can book a free online context call via my website. There's a QR code here, links directly to my calendar. We have a chat about what you're going through, how I might be able to help, if I'm the right person, if you're in the right place. Then from that, if it's something you're interested in progressing with, you get a tailored quote from me, bespoke for you. And then you book your online session and off we go. We start the work. It really is as quick and as simple as that. And a bonus for you for getting this far, thank you, is if you were to book with me, you get a free 1-hour accountability session 6 months after completing your coaching program. That means that you've got to crack on with your actions and keep the momentum going that you've achieved through your program, because you know you're meeting with me in 6 months' time. Work's a treat, this. It's worth £275, so it's a really great boost to your program and really helps keep the good work going for even longer. I only have 2 slots left to start working with me this month. And if you are going through a work transition and you are interested in something like this, I do encourage you to act quickly because of that narrow window. So please do book a call. Absolutely no obligation. It's completely free, 45 minutes with me to chat through your work transition and see what could be done. So hopefully today you've had something that gives you a few more things to think about that are appropriate for your work challenge, and you will absolutely go and smash that work transition. You've already taken a massive leap in the right direction today by coming here. So well done, keep it going and absolutely go for it. Get that energy. So I hope you found that helpful and you've had a few things now to think about. I'm now going to move to Q&A. So if you've got any specific questions, please drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll talk more generally about some of the situations that I know that you've brought up in the chat already. So what's on your mind? What really stood out for you or resonated with you from my talk? What questions have you got that I can help with now? Please do share in the chat. So while we're waiting for you to formulate your questions and stick them in the chat, I'll go through a couple of the scenarios that people have mentioned. There were quite a few sort of industry changes, industry moves. When thinking about a big change like an industry move or even a functional move, somebody mentioned moving functions, it's really important to go back to that clarity work. Really, why are you making this change? What do you need out of it that you're not getting from what you're doing now? Because a big change is going to require a lot of energy, time, resources from you. What is it that you absolutely need out of it? How is this going to be different for you? And how are you going to make sure that you make it what you need it to be? And often if we don't have network or contacts in another function or an industry, it means also for really focusing on that planning stage, really focusing on how do I make this happen? But there's no point doing that until you've done all the other stuff first, that getting clarity on what you need, you want, getting the strength and the energy together to make confident decisions for yourself, doing the reflection, then you can start doing the planning. And you will need support every stage to do that. So we've got somebody says they're going to have a think, come back. Absolutely. If you have any questions after this or thoughts after this, I'd love to hear them. I love chatting about work transitions. So always happy to receive emails, or if you want to book a call another time, absolutely. Thinking about the point that somebody made about no time to think as well. It's so important to make that time to think. And if you don't carve out the time and make it happen, you're going to drift. And there is that narrow window for maximizing work change. So please, I do encourage everybody to make sure that you're making the time to think. Obviously, having a thinking PT like a coach like me is a really great solution for that. But do find a way to do that. So we talked a little bit about moving functions. We talked about moving industries. So interesting thing about transitioning out of corporate. Anybody thinking about going out of a corporate role into something else, be that self-employed, non-exec, is a huge part of who we are comes from our work. We are very tied to our work when it comes to identity. And when we're moving out of something like corporate into something completely different, it's a part of our identity we're kind of severing. And it's also true to an extent with industry change or functional change. You know, I am an IT person, but I'm now going to be an HR person. And so you have to be super mindful that that's going to be kind of painful. Whenever we make a choice to go from one thing to another thing, even if it's a really positive choice, we want it, this is what we're making happen for ourselves, it's exciting. There is grief from making a choice because you're also losing something else or saying goodbye to something else. And a lot of people find it particularly difficult when they leave corporate to almost shed that kind of corporate skin a bit, to be able to think outside of the corporate way of thinking, which is going to be really important, especially if you're going into non-exec stuff or self-employed and working with non-corporate people. You've got to really shed that skin, and it can be difficult, I think, sometimes to identify what part of me is corporate-y and what isn't, because you've been in that world for so long or you've been in the HR world for so long where there are certain types of people, certain acronyms, and you know exactly what you're talking about, and you're very comfortable there. And then suddenly to be uncomfortable and have to be different does mean shedding something, saying goodbye to something. And it's natural for that to be a little bit sad, even if the overall thing is positive. But it has to be done in order to become something new. So it's like a butterfly. Somebody's popped something. Someone's moving into a cross-functioning role, new organization, EU scope, change of function as well. So that's a lot of change in one go. I hear you. That's tough. I've done that too. Like to earn trust across stakeholders from a person with no background in finance. Yeah, however, great skills for process improvement. And that's the main purpose of the role. Yeah, absolutely. And this will apply to quite a lot of people when you're moving function, to an extent, moving industry. Also, if you're going to become non-exec, how do you win trust quickly when you almost don't have the obvious credibility? I'm a massive fan of the trust equation. Not everybody is. So if you're not familiar with the trust equation, Google it. It's really interesting. It's from a book called The Trusted Advisor. And it talks about trust being an equation. You've got some things on top of the equation, some things on the bottom. The things on top grow trust. The things on the bottom degrade trust. And from memory, the things on top are reliability, credibility, and I've forgotten the other one, there were three. And the one underneath is self-interest. So when you don't have the obvious credibility, that's when you have to really dial up the skills credibility. So you've got to an extent, sort of talk the talk, even if you don't necessarily feel comfortable with it at first, to demonstrate how, yes, it might not be exactly in this function, but I've been through that kind of thing before. And you drop it into conversation, drop it in when you can. Reliability, and I think the other one's integrity, actually. Reliability is build trust through doing what you say you're going to do. If you don't know the answer, have the integrity. I don't know the answer to that yet, but you know what? I'm going to find out. And come back quickly. It's sometimes the little things like that that build trust with stakeholders really quickly, because they go, you know what? She might not know everything. She's come from this other department, but you know what? She learns really quickly. She always gets back to me. When she does get back to me, it's really good quality. And that builds trust. So even if you find on that trust equation that there's one thing that is not necessarily going to be as strong, and it usually is the credibility bit, because rarely are people lacking in integrity and reliability. Some people do lack that. So you have to almost like over dial up those other ones. And then self-interest at the bottom. People obviously don't like to feel like they're being manipulated. They don't like to feel like you're going to come in and push all of your supply chain ways on my finance team. And so showing that you don't have self-interest can be things as simple as being curious, asking questions, although I've been in this similar situation in supply chain and this is how we approached it. So there's some things I think we could learn from that. I really want to know, in your experience, how's it worked in finance? How have you seen this work well before? Not going, well, in supply chain, we would just do it like this, which I doubt you would do anyway, right? But being mindful of showing lack of self-interest by showing interest in others and learning from them can massively help build trust, because you're reducing the negative bit, if that makes sense. So I really recommend looking up the trust equation. It's a bit theoretical. It's a tiny bit dry, right? But the concept, I think, is quite interesting. And therefore, if you're not able to build trust across all areas, how do you dial up other areas and build trust quickly? So I think it's all about demonstrating your skills, being open to the fact that things are different here and that you are open to doing things differently, learning from them, learning from others, and that you're going to do it quickly, reliably, and with integrity. And that will go a huge way. So I hope that's helpful. Moved jobs quite a lot, working internationally due to redundancies. Different industries, corporate versus startup. Telling this story again and again can be draining interviews. Yeah, so being confident is really critical. Critique in job interviews is normal. Do you have any go-to tips to overcome this sort of thing, to come in strong? I think it comes back to that confidence bit. You have to really be clear on the stories you're almost telling yourself in your head. So I'd be really interested to know what makes telling the story again draining. Most people love talking about themselves. So I suppose it's what about telling that story is draining for you? Where's that coming from? And then what do you need to do differently to keep that story fresh, exciting, and positive for you, which will then naturally come across. So you've got to do the inner work for people to see it, if that makes sense. How do you pitch correctly for that growth role? They say men are hired for what they can become, women are hired for what they've done. I hear you. There's already a lack of equity, and without quoting the Barbie speech, any tips for this, please? One of my clients once described me as quite a lot like a man, and I didn't know whether to be happy about that or not. I think yes. I think a lot of it is because I was cooked, I was brought up in a sales environment, right? Which actually was, when I first started my career, initially quite male dominated. And I think I learned a lot of the behavior from them. Also, my personality preferences typically are things you would associate with the stereotypical male. We know all of this stuff is like stereotypes, right? I also work in DE&I. Let's not go into too much on this, right? But essentially, I think what we're saying here is, how do we come across as strong and confident, demonstrating that even if we haven't necessarily done something, we could absolutely nail it. Don't worry about it. And I think that it again comes back to that same thing. Do the inner work, be strong in yourself, know your own positive, credible, strong story, and be prepared. If you think you're going into an environment where this is going to be a thing, be prepared for exactly how are you going to say things? How are you going to structure things? I can't go into loads of detail here, but I also do interview coaching. And a lot of what I work with people there is selling yourself, which is where I bring my coaching and my old sales skills together. Sales 101 is understand your audience, what they want, and then magically you just show you have all the solutions. I mean, selling really is that simple. And that is what you're doing in an interview. Look at the words that they're using in the job description. Look at the experience that they're asking for. Yeah, you might be missing a couple of them, but actually, what skills do those kinds of things demonstrate that you can show in a different way to really show, of course you can do it. The difference is when a man walks in, he's like, yeah, I've done 5 of them. I'm sorry, I am totally gender stereotyping here, but there is data that backs this up, that a lot of men in particular will go in and think, I can do 5 of those things, the other 5 things I can learn. Well, why can't we just go in and feel like that? You have to work on it to get yourself into a place where you go and exude that. If that helps answer your question, hopefully. So any other questions before we wrap up? I realise I've gone 5 minutes over, but hopefully that was helpful for people. I could talk about this all day. If you want to ask more questions, if you've got more reflections, please book the call in. Absolutely no obligation. Have a chat for 45 minutes with me. I'd love to hear your story, what you're going through, what you're up to. And if there's an opportunity where I think I could help you, we could chat about that more. But it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing all of your transitions with me. Thank you for sharing your questions, which I'm sure won't just have helped you, but will have helped others. And hope you've got something out of this and you've got lots to go away and think about. I will share the recording with you, as record these sessions so that you can flick back over them. I do them every month. So if you know anybody else another time that's going through a work transition, or you want to jump on again and ask a specific question outside of a one-to-one call, then please do share wide and come back again if you'd like to, but obviously to see the same content, but just book one-to-one call with me. Anyway, lovely to meet you all. Thank you so much for your interactions and your engagement. All the best with your work transitions and all your inner work, and hope to speak with and meet some of you soon. All the best. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.